The idea of Hope Survives podcast is we want to provide hope for all of you, our listeners, but tangible hope, practical hope, not just this abstract concept of there is always hope, which is true, but what are some things that are really going to help you? And so Marlene had an amazing idea to share with you. And so I'm going to let her take it away here.
Thanks, Cristabelle. So the idea that Cristabelle is talking about is just the concept of taking all the medical recommendations that you may be receiving post-injury. And this goes for individuals who may not have sustained a brain injury, because I feel like, we all need to be able to learn how to practically apply any type of recommendation we receive from a professional. And, how do we apply it to our lifestyles? Because it's easy to say, hey, you need to go and do this. And then actually doing it becomes a little bit tougher. And so what we wanted to talk about was really practical ways on how to do that, and where do you start? How do you even begin?
I love this idea because as a survivor, there's been so many times that I've had medical professionals and providers give me exercises, whether it's from PT or OT or vision therapy, and they'll give me things to do at home once I'm discharged. And I have such a hard time really doing it, I'll try, but it's just like so hard to keep up with everything. And sometimes as a survivor, it's just overwhelming on figuring out how to do what you know that you need to do. And then you kind of get into a spiral of guilt of when you don't do it enough and you feel like it's hard to go back. And so I'm looking forward to these practical steps also for myself. So
right. So as you mentioned, you get recommendations, and again, trying to figure out where does that fit into your lifestyle. I think maybe the biggest barrier we run into is that we forget that there's so many other things that we're supposed to be tracking in life, right? We go into the doctor's office, we get a recommendation, and then we walk away not even questioning how it should be implemented. We just think we just got to do it, right? They told us this is what we have to do, so we just have to do it. But we don't really think about the implications it may have on, how easy is it actually going to be to implement this recommendation? And this is actually going to lead us into discussing, how do we communicate more effectively with our healthcare professionals who are making these recommendations for us, because that can help empower us to advocate more for, the type of lifestyle that we're living, that we want to continue living. If it's, obviously a healthy one, you want to maintain that balance in your life, but you also want to talk and make it more of a dialogue with the healthcare professional about, how is this recommendation truly going to benefit your lifestyle? So let's say you get recommended to take a certain medication and you have to take it 2 times a day. Well, it's easy to say you take it in the morning, you take it at night, right? But if you don't think about what might actually be going on in your life at the time that you might be taking your medication, that can have serious implications for how you follow through with that recommendation. So, I think that's something that you really want to examine, right? When you're given a recommendation, think about when in your day you're able to implement that recommendation, and think about all the barriers that may come up. Because you can set an alarm, which is, I know, something that's, a very effective tool. I think it's very important to set reminders for yourself. But let's say the alarm goes off in the evening and maybe you're in class in the evenings. Maybe you work in the evenings. Maybe you're with your kids in the evenings. What type of distraction is going to affect you actually following through with what that alarm is supposed to prompt you to do, right? Because I don't know about you, but there have been many times where my alarm has gone off and I know what it's for, but then something else comes up right in that moment and I'm distracted. And unless I have another alarm following it up a few minutes later, it's completely out my mind, right? So this is what happens a lot of times with our recommendations. So again, I think one of the biggest practical tips I can give everyone is, one, identify what the barriers may be to implementing whatever recommendation it is that you've been given. So again, when it comes to recommendations, maybe you know that this medication that was prescribed to you for twice a day is going to be difficult for you to maintain, especially in the evenings. Maybe mornings are less busy for you. And so you want to have this conversation with the prescribing doctor to say, do I need to take it twice a day? Is there an opportunity for me to take it more than that or less than that to fit my current lifestyle? Maybe there's an extended release option. So you only have to take it once a day. That's less for you to have to remember, right? And it's less of an interruption to your current lifestyle. Or maybe there isn't. Maybe this medication, you need to take it the way the doctor originally prescribed. So then that means maybe you need to make some adjustments to your current schedule, and again, that's where I think we really want to think long and hard about what the implications are when it comes to any recommendation we're given. We have to weigh out the importance of all of these recommendations in our lifestyle. And so that's something that you want to think about too. Like, what brings you the most meaning in life, and how are you going to set your schedule up? Because that's a big thing, to be mindful of your schedule in a way that helps you track all of the things that are meaningful to you, but including all of the things that are able to keep you stable so you can continue to engage in all of those meaningful things.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the point about schedule is a good one, because when it comes to schedule and routine, that is the thing that I think helps keep me on track the best. And I think could probably resonate with many of our listeners as well. I have a routine with my supplements and medicines. So I know this is what I take in the morning, this is what I take at night, and I have a routine that I do with that. I think what you said about having your lifestyle be, what's the word? Understood? Considered? I think considering your own lifestyle when it comes to these things, because it's really easy to have good intentions and think, yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I'm going to do this. And then when you forget and you find yourself overwhelmed, and then you're sitting there like, oh, I can't believe that I didn't do this. And, you start to get down on yourself. And so setting yourself up for success is, I like you said, identifying barriers, identifying what are some real life things that maybe could get in the way of this, and how are we going to work with this?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know sometimes it's not easy to identify what those barriers are ahead of time. Sometimes it's trial and error, right? So let's say you're already dealing with a situation where you had a medical professional make a recommendation, and you're currently trying to implement it into your lifestyle, but not as well as you thought you could. We don't want to call it unsuccessful right now, because, you're still trying. But, you're trying to figure out how are you going to do this? I think there is value in bringing it back to whoever recommended it to you and saying, hey, listen, this is what I'm struggling with. And then helping them realize that, maybe they need to help problem solve a couple more things, because again, sometimes recommendations are made and the assumption is made that you're just going to be able to follow through with it, So I think there's, again, a lot of value in being able to communicate that you may be struggling to do that, because maybe the barrier isn't obvious to you, but if you're able to discuss it and say, well, I wasn't able to do it this day because this is what happened. Again, the medical professional who made the recommendation may be able to help you identify a better way to problem solve through those barriers. And it may be them changing their recommendation altogether. Sometimes the recommendation might even be, you know what, let's hold off on this specific recommendation and let's work on something else, because sometimes you need to stabilize another area of your life before you can go and work on something else. And that's important. That's important to know, that there are several things that you're trying to juggle in life, and you want to be able to prioritize what's most important so that as the pieces fall in line, it becomes a little bit easier for you to manage.
I think that's a great point. And as a survivor, there's only so much that you can tolerate at once. And some days are different than other days. So let's say, you set up a schedule, an exercise schedule. Let's say you have exercises from PT or vision exercises, and all best laid plans, best laid intentions. You've worked it into your schedule, but then you wake up with a terrible headache. Mm-hmm. You're just having a bad brain day and you start to struggle. And then your exercises start to set off more symptoms because you're not tolerating it very well. And then you get behind, and then the next day, and it snowballs until the point where you're depressed and you're just feeling like you failed and like this week has been horrible. Not that I'm speaking from experience or anything, totally am. Totally speaking from experience. I know what it's like to take on too much and have all the best intentions of trying to implement medical recommendations, but just curling up and watching Netflix and feeling like failure. So what is some advice you would have for survivors who struggle with balancing all the things that they know that they need to do, but are unsure how to do them?
Yeah. First, I'd like to say, you're not alone in feeling that way. I think all of us end up in a situation where we feel like we should be doing something that we're not currently doing, right? And sometimes it could cost us our health and wellness stability. And other times it's more of just a disappointment factor in our own psyche. Like we're kind of being harder on ourselves than maybe others would be. So I think the best way again is to just keep talking about it. One of the biggest things we need to remember is that we're not alone when it comes to not being able to follow through on something that we know we should be doing, right? I think there are always times where we're not going to be our best selves. And maybe you're struggling with that now. The best thing for you to be able to do is not stay in that space, that headspace alone. The best thing you can do for yourself is to communicate, constantly communicate with others. We talked about how Rediscover You is like a support group. And of course, this podcast, Cristabelle, you get to share so much information with many listeners who I know value this experience. And I think that's something that you definitely want to encourage people to continue to do. Because if you don't talk about it, how are you supposed to get the help you need to be able to move forward? I was reading something about, we put a lot of confidence in ourselves and we think we can just do it, right? Do it on our own. Like it takes just our own willpower. But the truth is, sometimes that's not enough. And sometimes certain things we're not meant to do on our own. We were meant to connect with others. And it's important to keep that in mind so that you can, again, learn from others and they can learn from you. And then you can move forward in, whatever you're experiencing in the moment together. So definitely keep talking about it because you never know who's going to say the one thing you needed to hear to help you get over whatever slump you're in.
Through your darkest night, hope survives.